Hello, everyone. Good morning, good day. My name is Ravi Turlapati. I'm a senior director here at OCI, working on a multi-cloud platform. And with me, I have my colleague, John Wargo, who also works on the multi-cloud platform. And largely with our team, we're very excited to present this new product that we brought to market recently. The service name is Oracle Database Service for Microsoft Azure. We announced this product on July 20th at Microsoft Inspire, and we've developed this product in close partnership with Microsoft, and we're very excited to go through a deep dive session with you. In today's call, we have a two-part agenda. First, we're going to talk about what was the genesis for the product, why did we build it, in what scenarios does it really help customers accelerate their cloud migration journey, and we're going to talk a few knobs and dials, do a little bit deeper dive about how it meets your core use cases. And after we run through it, we're going to ask you to answer a few poll questions so we get directional customer feedback to help shape our roadmap. And then where rubber meets the road, John is going to run through a demo of the product, and you'll be able to see what the knobs and dials are. And after that, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. And before we go into a deeper dive about the service itself, I'd like to impress Microsoft and Oracle have long partnered over last 20, 30 years to provide technologies that were interoperable. And many enterprises have actually built their IT estate over decades, primarily built on Microsoft and Oracle products. And this was a fairly successful partnership. But in the last 10 years, what we have seen is there's been a big shift. And one of the big shifts we have seen is, customers are now migrating to the cloud. It's no longer a question of if, it's a question of when the cloud migration is going to happen. And as customers migrate to the cloud, on our end, we were trying to explore and see what does it mean for us to give the same kind of interoperability to customers in the cloud like they have it on premises. And that was the genesis for the product. And we said, what if we combine the best of what Azure, Microsoft's cloud, is known for from the app tier to what Oracle is known for in the cloud, which is our enterprise grade databases. That was really the genesis for the product. Now, of course, when we think about on-premises infrastructure, there are many challenges that customers run into, which are the benefits that cloud offers, which is why so many customers are migrating to the cloud today. But that said, one of the problems does not exist, which is where do I place my database in relation to compute? On premises, you can co-locate your databases with your compute. When you move to the cloud, especially when you move to a multi-cloud paradigm, one of the key questions that comes up is, firstly, how do you connect different components spread across two different clouds? And an obvious segue for us was to figure out how do we lay out the connectivity or the network backbone to bring the two clouds together. So our partnership with Microsoft started 2 years ago, and it started in 2019 with the OCI Azure Interconnect. And what the interconnect provided was a low latency network backbone that allowed customers to use any OCI resources over the network backbone, communicating with any resources in Azure. And when we first started this, although we had directional customer signals, we were very curious to see how it would play out because it was a paradigm shift in the cloud industry, bringing two major cloud giants together to give an interoperable solution. And what we saw over 2 years was very heartening. The OCI Azure Interconnect had a lot of customer stories. We have hundreds of enterprises who are using the solution to good effect. And as customers went on the success journey, one of the themes that emerged was there was a pattern where customers were using the app tier in Azure with the enterprise grade databases in OCI. And many of the customers that we worked with asked us if we can do better to remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting and help improve the overall offering and cut down the time to market for them with the multi-cloud offering. And that was the driver for this new service, which is Oracle Database Service for Azure. And with this service, we further simplify what it means for you to run your workloads using a multi-cloud paradigm. So for first things first, this service is tailor made for customers with heavy Azure workloads. So with this service, we provide you an Azure-like interface. And what that interface allows you to do is, in just a matter of clicks, you'd be able to link your Azure subscription to an OCI tenancy. In a matter of minutes, you're able to connect both the clouds. And once you've connected the two clouds, the interface allows you to go do a fairly simple set of intuitive actions, which is to go create or provision OCI databases. And once you provision those databases, you'd be able to use them in your Azure workloads over this low latency interconnect connection that we manage for you. The one of the differences with this solution, Oracle directly manages the OCI Azure interconnect. It is tailor-made for you, and we automatically scale with your workload. Before we take a deeper dive, I just want to take a few steps back and kind of impress on you how at OCI we think about meeting customers where they are. Needless to say, cloud migrations are not all that simple, especially with the plethora of options that customers have today. And as we talk to CIOs, one of the consistent themes that we hear is when you migrate your workloads to the cloud, what the key driver is to figure out how do you do it in a way that does not disrupt your core business operations. And what companies don't want to go have outages just while they're doing their cloud migrations. And to meet those needs, we have multiple offerings in OCI. We started our journey with giving offerings where that help customers use OCI Cloud in hybrid cloud scenarios. So we have offerings such as dedicated regions. We announced the Exadata Cloud at Customer a couple of years ago. Like I mentioned, in 2019, we came up with the Azure Interconnect, which does the tangential play, wherein you're able to use OCI along with a different cloud, in this case Azure. And then the latest offering, Oracle Database Service for Azure, is an evolution on top of the interconnect story. And in a nutshell, what this product allows you to do is basically three simple things. The first step is we allow you to link the two clouds, and when we link the two clouds, underneath the hood, we do a couple of things. For example, we set up not only do we set up the network link, but we also allow you to automatically federate your Azure Active Directory credentials. And what that allows you to do is you no longer have to go create a new set of credentials in OCI. You can do that if you want to, but you don't need to. You can go manage the OCI databases using this new offering, using your Azure AD credentials. And that simplifies administration for Azure heavy users. The second step, of course, is once you go link the two clouds, like I mentioned earlier, you can go create the databases, and we give you a set of wizards and options that simplifies database provisioning, as well as administration of the databases. More importantly, once you have your database up and running, we also pipe all of the telemetry relating to the database, such as the database metrics, events, and logs, back into Azure. And we have a deep integration with Azure. So, for example, the logs would show up in Log Analytics. The events would be piped to Azure Event Grid, and you'd be able to see your metrics and App Insights. What this allows users, Azure heavy users, to do is you now have your database metrics, although the database is in OCI, directly populating in Azure. So it kind of gives you a one-stop shop, a unified telemetry for you to troubleshoot your production incidents and run your operations. In a nutshell, if you have to summarize, with this offering, what we're doing are two things. First, you are getting a familiar Azure experience, and all of the nomenclature that we use in the product is Azure-like. And so from an end user point of view, if you're new to OCI, you don't really have to invest and go learn about the Oracle Cloud infrastructure if you don't need to. That's one. On top of that, we are already leveraging the global network that we laid out in 11 regions with a super fast, low latency network connection, and we manage the network connectivity for you. So, as an example, if your application were to scale in throughput and you go from 1 Gbps and now you want to consume a 5 Gbps line, with interconnect, the onus was on the customer to go figure out that they hit the bandwidth and that they have to increase the network connection. But with ODSA, we automatically manage the network connectivity for you, and so we would automatically scale with your application workload. So, as we like to say, it's as cloud native as it can get, with a resource being in a completely different cloud. And why go through this journey when there are database offerings in other clouds? Well, the short answer to that is, although you can spin up single instance Oracle databases, if you want to use the OCI enterprise grade database services, such as the Autonomous DB or XSES, which are known for being the best of breed in the market, those offerings, the only way to do it is to initiate those within OCI and bring them closer to Azure. So with this offering, you now have a new choice of database offerings for your Azure workloads. And I'd highly encourage you all to go explore Gartner reports, which gives you an in-depth analysis on where Oracle stands with database offerings in the cloud, and you'd see us in the top right quadrant. And to bring this all together, tying with the theme of interoperability, like I mentioned, on premises, Oracle and Microsoft technologies are highly interoperable. And with our new set of innovations, what we're doing is trying to bring the same level of interoperability into the cloud paradigm. Now, needless to say, when we do this, and you stitch an application that with components that straddle two different clouds, you now have a new problem, which is, what do you do when you have production support issues? Do you have to call Microsoft? Do you have to call Oracle? Are we doing a ping pong? These are natural questions that anybody would face. And we have a simple solution for you. What we've also done is we have a collaborative support model with Azure. And what that really gives customers is a single throat to choke. So in case of any support issues, all you have to do is raise a single customer support request. You can choose to raise it either in Azure or OCI. Regardless of whether the issue is in Azure, this OCI support representative would run through the issue end to end with you, handhold you until the issue is troubleshooted. And we have the same partnership with Microsoft, where let's say you have a better enterprise support contract with Azure, and that's what you'd like to leverage, and you raise a support incident with Azure, then even if the issue is on the OCI side of the house, the same support representative would troubleshoot the issue end to end. And behind the scenes, we have a warm handoff and a trained pool of support engineers. And a few stats for you to consider. Like I said, I encourage you to go look at Gartner reports as to see why OCI leads with database offerings in this space. With ODSA, we do acknowledge, many of our customers that we build the solutions for already have a significant on-prem Oracle estate that they've long used. And so with this offering, we also support all of the commercials that you probably are used to. So we allow you to bring your own licenses and make it easy for you to migrate your Oracle databases into the cloud. The one other thing that I'd like to impress upon you guys is, when as we launched this particular product, we did take a long time to run a beta program, and with customers using the service and giving us early directional feedback that helped shape how we build the service. And if you see the theme emerge from all of our customer testimonials, one of the key themes is that with this offering, it truly simplifies your cloud migrations. And the reason for that is, prior to a multi-cloud solution, customers had to figure out how they would migrate their Oracle databases. And if they're migrating their Oracle databases to the cloud and they want to choose a different cloud provider for their app tier, what would that mean? And the long pole in the tent in cloud migrations is de-risking your database migration. We believe with this particular offering, and what customers have told us is, as you can see from these testimonials, it's a no-brainer to migrate your on-prem Oracle databases to OCI, and then leverage multi-cloud offerings such as the new service that we have offered to run your app tiers in Azure. Veritas, as an example, did exactly that. They have terabytes of their data running in XSES, which is our flagship offering in OCI. And they were able to analyze this data, terabytes of data, using Azure Synapse and leveraging the network connectivity that we give with ODSA. With that, that brings to the end of my presentation. What I'd ask, if you guys can help us with this, you'd see a set of poll questions pop up on your window at this point. We take a couple of minutes to go answer the poll questions, and after we're done with the poll, I'll hand it off to my colleague John, who's gonna show you an actual demonstration of the product that kind of shows you what it means to link the two clouds, spin up an environment, and kick around the tires. And after we're done with the demo, we'll open it up for Q&A. Thank you all for your responses. We'll move to the next stage of our presentation, which is my colleague John doing the demo. John, off to you.
Awesome, thanks, Ravi. Hello, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me into your computer screens. So I want to start with talking about the onboarding process. I saw a bunch of questions coming in asking about kind of how this works and how you configure things and use things in ODSA. So I'm going to show you that now. And by the way, I would say Oracle Database Service for Azure so many times a day that, of course, we abbreviated it. So when you hear me say ODSA, that's what I'm referring to, which is the Oracle Database Service for Azure. So when a user wants to onboard their Azure environment into ODSA, there's several processes they can go through, but they all culminate in this. The user goes to a landing page. They log in with their Azure credentials, because everything we do is with the user's Azure credentials. Once they log in, they provide their password. They're immediately asked to provide permissions for us to do some things in their Azure environment. And you'll see more about this in a second, but we ask for a minimum set of permissions that we need to onboard the account. And then later on, we would ask for more if the customer picks a particular path. So the next thing that happens is they're taken to the landing page where we describe the three key components of onboarding an Azure environment with ODSA. There's the account linking process, which essentially links that Azure tenancy with an OCI tenancy, either one that you may already have or one that you may create during this process. And then we link one or more subscriptions from the user's Azure tenancy into ODSA. And that basically tells us which subscriptions we want to use to provision those resources. And then finally, Ravi mentioned this earlier, we have the ability to automate identity federation between Azure and OCI, so that if a user ever does need to go into OCI to do anything, they can log into OCI with their Azure credentials. And we try to make this simple. We have some custom roles we create in Azure for our service, and we only federate those users that are in those groups that we create there. So basically at this point, the user makes a choice. Do I want to do the fully automated configuration, which does all three of those steps individually or in sequence, or do I want to go through automated account linking only? So if I do the fully automated configuration, we ask for an additional set of permissions, and then we automate the whole thing. If we do the automated account linking only, there's some additional configuration steps the user has to do once they get to the ODSA portal to complete the configuration of the system, but it gives customers a wider range of options for how they do what they do when they configure ODSA. So if the user selects the fully automated process, the first thing they do is they select one or more Azure subscriptions in their environment that they want to link to ODSA. We know that customers have hundreds or thousands of them, so we don't want to automatically federate all or link all of them across to ODSA. So we give customers the ability to link the specific subscriptions they want. Next, they either create or log into an existing OCI tenancy. And then once that step is completed, we show them this really cool interstitial page and then take them to the ODSA portal. And with that, I'm going to actually go into the ODSA portal. So as Ravi mentioned, we deliberately delivered this as an Azure-like experience for several reasons. One, we knew that our customers were Azure experienced with the Azure environment, and we aren't able to deliver this in the Azure portal today. So we had to create a separate portal where we did things. And by creating this with the Azure look and feel, administrators and developers on the Azure side don't have to spend any time learning a new console. They are presented with something that they're already familiar with. So from this portal, we have options to create a bunch of resources, which I'll show you in a little bit. And then the 3 primary database services that we expose through ODSA are listed as options here. We also have the ability to monitor deployments in the environment. This is deployments of hardware and so on that we deploy for these databases. Users can see information about their account billing related to this. They can manage, link in additional subscriptions that they need be. And as Ravi mentioned earlier, the ability to get a support ticket created either for technical issues or for limits increases. And then, as he mentioned, we will work closely with Azure to resolve whatever issues they are on both sides. So let's start by creating a resource, and then I'll go back in and show you. I'm going to start with Autonomous Database, which is a fun and interesting database service from Oracle. I first select my Azure subscription, and then I have to associate this particular resource with a resource group in Azure. I'm going to call this Web Demo 1, and then I select the region where I want that particular resource deployed in OCI. Although for Azure customers, this will actually be the list of Azure regions. Next, I configure the configuration for my environment, whether I want to do transaction processing, data warehousing, specify the number of CPUs, specify my license and auto scaling and so on. And then from there, I select my database version and provide a database name. Finally, I configure how I want to access this database, whether it's from the public access or only allowed IP addresses, enable encryption for authentication and so on, give my database a password. I have the ability to assign tags to my resources. They're created. Tags are something that's a known thing in both Azure and OCI, so we support that within the environment. And then finally, we will validate the configuration, and the user can click create and actually create that database. And then at that point, the process kicks off to create that database. But let me show you when it's already created, because that particular process can take a while. So this is Exadatabase, both Exadatabases environments that we've deployed, as well as databases we've deployed within those environments. I'm going to go into one of the databases I made a while ago. And so this is a view of the database properties in the ODSA portal. If I need to go see it in OCI, I can click this link and get there, but I know I don't need to do that because everything I need to do is available to me here. Since we're dealing with Azure Applications, we automatically generate and display an Azure connection string that a developer on the Azure side can use to let their Azure application, either a service or a custom application, talk to this particular database. So that's pretty cool. I can start and stop my database. I can clone it. I have automatic backups that I can do, or I have backups of the database I can do, and so on. So that's all available here. Now, you reach a point where you want to work with the actual database, and then rather than link that particular, I've suddenly lost my train of thought. So rather than just do things here, we expect that users to be able to do things in the Azure portal. So if I go to the Azure portal, when I log in, as Ravi mentioned, I have data streaming from ODSA into Azure. So for the first thing we do is we automatically create a dashboard for each database resource that we create in Azure. From here, we warn the user that this is automatically generated, so if they make any changes, we'll overwrite them the next time they change things in ODSA. I've got some information about the database as well as a link to the database in the ODSA portal. I have my connection strings here, and then I also have database metrics that are coming in from the database on the OCI side through ODSA. And so what this means is that a developer working with this database in ODSA or OCI has all the information they need to add this application or this database to their application. And since all of these metrics are available in Azure, any application dashboard that they build to help them monitor their application, they can very easily add database metrics to that dashboard. If they want to monitor and trigger alerts based upon database metrics or particular events, that data is also in Azure, so they have the ability to do that using these existing tools that they use in Azure today. So let me give you an example of that. So if I go actually back to my home page and I go into Application Insights, you'll see that I have an Application Insights workspace for the database that I'm working in. Now, these database metrics aren't database metrics from Azure or from OCI. So you won't expect to see that there. What you have to do is I go into metrics. I select the metrics namespace, which is Oracle OCI Database. And then each of the standard database metrics that they have availability that they can see in OCI, they can also see here in the Azure portal. And so the user or the developer, like I said, has the ability to use these metrics anywhere inside of Azure that they need to run their application, monitor their application, and understand when the application isn't performing as it needs to. And that essentially is the overview of the Oracle Database Service for Azure. Did I miss anything, Ravi? You're welcome.
So we see a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to impress on a few key areas, consistent themes that we're seeing. So hopefully that answers some of them. So one of the questions that I keep seeing is, how do we reason about the new ODSA offering versus interconnect? So we'll run through a few differences between the two and kind of talk about in what scenarios you should choose one or the other. So firstly, with interconnect, interconnect gives you the network backbone, but at the end of the day, it's a connection that's managed by you as a customer. And it is, so in that sense, it is a single tenant solution. You don't, you own the connection. The way pricing works for interconnect, you pay for port charges on both sides, but we don't charge you for ingress or egress. And because it's a network connection, and that's all it is, it allows any resource in OCI to communicate with any resource in Azure, right? So you can conceive possibly a compute instance in OCI communicating with a data lake or a database in Azure if that's a pattern that you'd want to explore, and those combinations are possible. This service ODSA is tailor-made for a specific use case, which is you're running your app tier in Azure and you're leveraging the OCI enterprise-grade databases, right? It's for that specific scenario. And with this, the network connection is managed by Oracle, so you don't have to manage it. That said, of course, we build the network connection on top of interconnect, so you can expect the workings to be similar to that of interconnect. It's just that Oracle manages the connection for you. So one of the benefits that you get because Oracle manages the connection is we automatically scale with your application workload. So in interconnect, as an example, I was mentioning this earlier. Let's say you choose a 1 Gbps pipe, and you hit your network throughput. In that scenario, you'd have to go figure out that you've hit the throughput, and then you can go bump it up to 5 Gbps as an example, but that's something that you as a customer would have to manage and do. With ODSA, we automatically scale the connection and the throughput for you with an increase in your application workload. So it's a managed connection. The second thing to note is a big difference. The network connection here is a multi-tenant one. Yes, you do have a private. It's a private connection for you, but it's multi-tenant. So for some customers who have very sensitive workloads or internal regulations at the company, if you want to use only a single tenant solution, then you get the benefits of this multi-cloud offering to a large extent, but you should explore the OCI Azure interconnect for those scenarios. But if you're comfortable with a multi-tenant solution, then you can definitely leverage ODSA. So that's the other thing to note. In both scenarios, we do have the support agreement with Azure. So in both scenarios, you can call either Microsoft or Oracle, and the same support agreement would apply. So those are the big differences. The other question that we typically see is, obviously this is a paradigm shift in how customers have typically thought about multi-cloud or cloud migration journeys in general. So where does ODSA fit in? So first things first, in terms of, because the compute instance and database are in separate clouds, latency between the two becomes an important thing to consider. So we do provide sub millisecond, 2 millisecond SLA over the OCI Azure interconnect. So just in terms of the broad spectrum to think about, that's the latency profile for your applications. With that latency profile, we believe, and what customers have told us, it works for a large portion of the application workloads, but we are not claiming that it works for every scenario. So if you have real-time or high-frequency trading scenarios, in many cases, those workloads possibly cannot be in the cloud. And for those, we have a different set of product offerings, such as dedicated region cloud and customer, where we bring the cloud to your data center. So for a certain set of latency profiles, this product offering may not work, but for a large portion of your application workloads, this latency profile works. Now that the latency profile works, under what scenarios is it useful for you? So I'd say basically three things. First things first, if you have a large Oracle on-premise state, this simplifies because it gives you a path to migrate your databases to OCI and meaningfully use it with your Azure workloads. So we do hear from customers, as you can see in these testimonials, that it simplifies cloud migrations. The second scenario is if you're running your single instance Oracle databases in Azure, well, as a customer, you have to manage those databases. You have to vertically and horizontally scale them. With this offering, you now have the option to consider OCI databases directly and use them in your Azure workload. So you don't have to go install or deploy and manage a single instance or fairly simple Oracle databases in Azure. You can actually use the enterprise-grade offerings we have. So that's a second use case. A third use case we've been hearing from customers is if you're building a completely cloud-native application from scratch, all in the cloud, and you're choosing Azure, you now have an additional choice with the OCI databases to use for your Oracle workloads, and that's another option. You have additional optionality for you. And what we've seen with customers is typically there's a stage of cycle and maturity in terms of how projects are realized. So typically what we have seen is customers would want to go do a proof of concept, maybe test a non-production application workload profile over this offering. And we have many POCs that we're running with numerous customers. So our message to you and request to you is if you're interested, please reach out to your Oracle representatives. They'd work with our team, and we can provide you support to run a proof of concept that kind of meets your business goals and success criteria. And assuming you like the POC, then you can make a decision about meaningfully using it with your production workloads. So yeah, if you have any questions, we are happy to do further deep dives. We are happy to provide you white glove support and run through POCs. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your Oracle teams that are working on site with you. Those are the three themes of questions that I came across. John and team, are there other questions that you see that we might address?
So many users, well, several users are asking about, for example, how do I sign up for the service? ODSA is not in the marketplace. ODSA is, you just access it via a link that you can, I'm trying to find it right now to share it with everybody, but you just go to the landing page for the product and you can click on getting started. And from the documentation, you can get right into onboard the service. I'll share that link in the chat window in a second.
Okay. Yeah, I do see we have a few outstanding questions. At this point, we don't have a whole lot to share. What we'll do is we'll answer those questions via the Q&A window. And in a couple of minutes, probably in about 3 minutes or so, 11:45 Eastern, we'll end the webinar and we'll give you 15 minutes back. Okay, I think we're at the fair end of our presentation. We saw a few questions come through about the content and the material. We would be posting this on YouTube. It will be available on OU Web in 2 to 3 business days. We'll also present these materials and on our website and other places. So please look forward to that. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your Oracle representative. Thanks again for your time. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and we appreciate you joining the session.